Oh, sorry.
Nope,
Okay.
nope, it's okay. I'm okay.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Hi. Oh my God.
Hi.
Long time no see. How are you?
I am, well, you might remember Garth Walker, who was a volunteer in the archives. He was 96 at the time. And he used to say, I am able to sit up and take nourishment.
Right.
And I thought that is really great. In times such as these, I am able to say, I am able to sit up and take nourishment. And thanks be to God for that. How about
I
you, my friend?
I am doing good. So you're talking about taking nourishment. Like I had a meeting with a student on Monday, and we decided that what we can say is I'm middle. Like, how are you doing?
Nice.
I'm middle. Because
Yeah.
we all want to default to I'm fine because this COVID thing has become our new normal.
But
It
I don't know who is. Is
Yeah,
anybody fine?
no, I don't think we are. Right? Like this is none of this is normal. It's all weird and it's not okay. Right?
Yeah,
Like
we can just say that. Hey, yep, let's do it.
so it's all good. I had a few students who said they might join us.
Cool.
Um, the nature of campus ministry during COVID is that people were doing 5 to 7 hours of Zoom a day for class, so they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
necessarily show up for this.
No problem at
So
all.
I tend to record things, I put it out, and then suddenly I get all sorts of feedback. So it's
Yay.
we just go with it. And so this is you're a William Stringfellow fan, right?
Huge,
So this is
huge.
I call this my Stringfellow speaker series. So you are a
I might
Stringfellow
actually cry.
you're a Stringfellow speaker. You're joining people like Brian McLaurin, James Allison, so on and so forth. So you're in good company.
Okay. I wish I had worn something more official than my fox sweater.
Okay, so I'll do my little spiel and we'll do this thing. Okay.
Great. Can I just say one thing? I
Yeah.
am on reserve. Our internet speeds aren't great, so I
Okay.
might be a bit glitchy, and I apologize for that. If it becomes problematic, I may have to turn my camera off, but
Okay.
I will
That's fine.
let you decide when it becomes problematic.
That is fine. The last person I talked to, we got our time zones mixed up. So
Amazing.
he did it from the car while driving and having Google Maps going. So I couldn't actually see his face because half the time because of that. So
I feel so much better. Awesome.
my favorite Canadian slang term is gong show. So these
Gong
speakers,
show.
these have definitely been a gong show, and that's okay. It's okay.
Amazing. Thank you.
So I am the United Campus Ministries pastor, minister, sorry, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I represent 5 denominations, so among
Oh,
them the Episcopal Church.
yes.
You are the am I going to get this right? The reconciliation animator for the Anglican Church, right?
Yes, I am.
Which the Anglicans and the Episcopals were kind of all in the same family of churches. For not my students who don't always understand that. So tell us about what you do and how you got there.
Whoa. Well, let me start by the way, this is Dexter.
Dexter, hello.
So he appears in most of my Zoom things. First of all, I need to acknowledge that I am coming to you from unceded Inklakatma territory. And in Canada, there's a growing practice of acknowledging the territory on which we live, work, worship, and play. And it's a way of undoing some of the colonial mantras and colonial ideas that we as a church and as settler people have been indoctrinated with. So the land that I live, work, worship, and play on is unceded, which means that settlers are here illegally, including myself. We have settled here on untreated land, which means that there are no legal or treated agreements with the First Nations here,
Oh, wow.
which makes us settlers here. So I have the blessing of chief and council here, and also I'm adopted into the Lytton Band of the Inklakatma First Nation, which is why I am able to be here. And so I acknowledge not only that I am a settler here, an invited guest, but also that what I do to the land here, I also do to the people. So I just wanted to start by saying that. So
Wow.
yes, Iatik Shuenwin, good morning. I am the reconciliation animator for the Anglican Church of Canada. So if we think of animation, it's taking something, a drawing, a static drawing, or a set of static drawings, and causing that to move. Oh, hi, Dexter. So you take something that could stay frozen in time, and you cause it to move and to continue to inspire people. So my role in the church is basically to do that. The Anglican Church of Canada went through an 8-year Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was inspired by and brought to us by survivors of the Indian residential school system in Canada. The Anglican Church was, for over 130 years, involved in removing Indigenous children from their families of origin, from their land, and putting them in residential schools and not allowing them to speak their language. There was a lot of physical, sexual, spiritual, and psychological abuse. So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was for the government of Canada and the churches, as well as ourselves, who ran residential schools, to begin to come to grips with this and to begin to hear the truth and look at what it means for us to be a reconciling people. So my job is to help us in that conversation, to animate that conversation. And I came to this place because, as you know, I was an archivist. I'm always going to be an archivist, but I was an archivist for the Anglican Church of Canada, and I entered into that role unaware that I was a racist, unaware that I had been formed colonially, and that my idea of Canada might not be the experience of everyone. And it was in working with residential school survivors, people who honored me with their stories, that I had a personal, professional, and spiritual transformation, which led me to apply for this job that I'm now in. That was really long-winded, sorry.
Well, I like you talked about the part where you didn't realize that you were a racist. And I think for a lot of us white folks, like, I like to view myself as woke, but I realize I'm only lucid dreaming, right? Like, I'm still in the dream. I might have a bit of control over the dream. Really, I'm still embedded in the dream.
Yeah.
And this became very clear to me recently when a friend of mine, who I've known since I was 18 years old, I've been to concerts with this guy, I've been on epic road trips with this guy, and he tweeted, I'm at a corn mosh pit. And my first thought was, Black people like heavy metal? I have known this guy since I was 18. Like, where did that come from, right? Like, just the unexamined stuff in myself, because I can never be fully woke, I can be lucid dreaming. So what has your journey been with owning your own racism, and how do you allow a space for, like, continuously discovering that, because you're never going to be clear of it?
Thank you. Yeah, I often introduce myself as a recovering racist.
Okay.
I don't think that, I have family who have addiction. I have struggled with addiction in the past, and we talk about it as an ongoing process. It's not that we somehow become, we're over it. It's something that we every day, or, from my lips to God's ears, maybe once a week, have to continually examine and say, whoa, I just caught myself having a sick thought there.
Right.
And so I definitely, it definitely came to me in the archives. There's a talk that I did where I talked about what my attitude was going into the TRC. As an archivist, my role was to provide records of the residential school system. And I was a new grad, and as new grads are, I had all these incredible ideas of programs I wanted to implement. I was going to, publish Friends of the Archives books of histories of the bishops. I had all these, like, best laid plans, and literally 3 months after I got the job, the residential schools agreement was signed and implemented. So my first job was to go through all of the residential school records. And so I saw in black and white, literally black and white, and I think this is the very sad part for me, and I just have to own it. It wasn't until I saw white people confirming the stories of Indigenous people that I believed it. I had heard residential school stories before, but because of my racism, I thought, that is blown way out of proportion. There's no way that happened in Canada.
Right.
And because of my racism, it wasn't until I saw in black and white bishops writing, our mission will only succeed if we annihilate the Indians. Right. When I saw that in black and white, that's when I believed it. And so it's an ongoing journey, right? Where I Am I listening to the voices? And then am I listening and believing? What is it in me that resists? So it's a constant battle every day, every single day.
And you talked about how, like, we don't do that in Canada, right? Like
Yeah,
that difficulty. And I remember, because I miss Canada a lot. Like, I really miss Canada. But there was
we
this
miss you.
but there was this tendency among Canadians, right, that
Mhm.
bad things happened in America,
Yeah,
right? That's not
yeah,
us. I mean, I remember someone once told me, "Oh, did you know in America they have racism?"
yeah,
As if like it all stopped at the border,
yeah.
right? Like, so when you're in your job, when you're working with, the pale folks, how do you get us to confront and own our own racism? Like, what does that process look like? And
One of the gifts that I think God has entered into my journey and inspired me to use my journey to help other folks who look like me. So often, when I am in a group of non Indigenous settler folks, and by non Indigenous settler folks, I mean white folks, I will say aloud my racist thoughts because I think that we as Canadians have been indoctrinated that we are polite, that we are the peacekeepers of the world. Literally, like, we send peacekeepers, we don't send infantry. We're not the bad guys that go around invading other countries. We don't go and beat people up. We go in and seek the peace. And we do that because we've learned so well how to do it in our own country. That is undeniably what we are indoctrinated with. And so there's a level of denial and a level of ignorance. And I think that where Christ enters in is in helping the scales fall off. So one of the things that I do is I say my racist thoughts. So I say, when I went into the archives, I still believed that all Indians were drunk
mm,
and that they were lazy and didn't want to get jobs. And that if they wanted to get a job, they should move off reserve where it's pretty clear there are no jobs. They should move to the city and get a job. That's what I had to do.
right.
And I'll say that out loud. And all of a sudden, I see people, they're shocked. And then you kind of see them thinking, yeah, if I really think about it, I guess I think that too. Yeah. And so I try to create a safe place. And I don't mean a safe place for racism. I
Right.
do not create a space where racism is safe. I try to create a space where acknowledging our racism is safe and saying aloud, whoa, I am way off base here, is safe.
Right. Wow. And do you get a lot of pushback from pale folks?
Yep, all the time, all the time. And from every level, I get hate mail from everyone from the pew to the House of Bishops.
Oh, wow.
So it's hard sometimes. Yep. Yep.
So what is, like, the shape of your work, like on a day-to-day basis, or working with congregations or working with people? Like, what does it look like? What is that process like? And
Sorry, I always laugh because this is a fantastic question that I can never answer because so I always give this example. There was a day when I traveled a lot, when pre-COVID, when we could travel. I was traveling most of the time. I think in the span of 3 months, I was home maybe 10 days.
oh, wow.
And there was one day where in the morning I was in northern Manitoba, which for American folks is kind of the middle. Kind of the middle. It's a prairie province with a little bit of Canadian Shield rock there. And I was in Tatasquiac, Manitoba, which the English name is Split Lake, Manitoba. And someone had shot a deer. And so we were hauling this deer into a pickup truck. And I was there in my jeans and my hiking boots and my parka, and it was minus 25. And then about an hour later, we got in the truck and we drove for 4 hours to the nearest little town that had an airport. And I flew 4 hours to the nearest city, which was Winnipeg. And then I took another flight to Montreal. And that evening, and for American folks, Montreal is one of our largest cities, like next to Toronto. It's our largest city at this point. And that night, I put on a dress and heels, and I spoke in the Cathedral of Montreal to the wealthiest and whitest sector that's not entirely true. The Diocese of Montreal is actually incredibly diverse, and it was really great to see a diverse audience there. But what I'm trying to say is that it was such a day of, that's my average day. It could be anything. It could be meeting with a youth group. It could be meeting with students. It could be presenting to the House of Bishops. It could be sitting around a sacred fire eating deer meat and listening to stories.
Nice. Very
Yep.
nice.
Yep.
So I should give a little context for La Crosse, Wisconsin. We are
Yeah, please do.
we are on Ho-Chunk territory. And then about 45 minutes up the road in Black River Falls is the Ho-Chunk government. But we have a large Ho-Chunk population here in La Crosse. And the big controversy last summer, there was a statue downtown that had been there for decades. A statue was called Hiawatha, on Ho-Chunk territory, wearing Plains garb with the wrong name. And the white folks didn't understand why this was an issue, right? Because aren't we honoring the Ho-Chunk people by having this here? And that finally got taken down. Like I remember going downtown, and all of a sudden, like there was people there taking it down. Like they voted one night, the next day it was down. Like it was all of a sudden, which of course generated a lot of conversation, right? And what I've noticed in the churches here, and because I work with 5 denominations, I work with a lot of churches, is that we don't know how to speak about it, right? Like asking folks, did you preach on it? No. Or I did a passing reference to it. Or in your Bible study, did you find a way to intersect with this? Oh, no. So what do you recommend for churches that want to address this topic right head on? And part of that is I'm in campus ministry on Ho-Chunk territory. We have a very close relationship with the Native American Student Association, and we want to do this right. So what is your wisdom for us?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. What I have learned in my own work with churches in particular is that churches are resistant to or afraid of political conversations. And so often, what I see us trying to do as churches is to enter into a political conversation about this. And I find that that's when things go sideways. One of the things that the self-determining Indigenous Anglican Church here in Canada has really taught me is to center all of our conversations around the gospel. So the elders were asked, through all of colonization, how did you survive and how did you keep a faith in all this? And they said, we just put the gospel at the center of everything we did, and that showed us a way through. So we begin all of our meetings with gospel-based discipleship, which I can send you a link to, which is a gift from Indigenous Ministries to the church as a way of centering our work together, where we begin with reading the gospel of the day. We don't pick a gospel that suits what we are doing. We trust that the gospel will speak to us, to whatever we are doing. We trust that the Spirit is with us when 2 or 3 are gathered. And so in meetings, particularly those that are keen to become quite political and quite fraught, we have been taught to begin that way. And when things become tense, when things become controversial, that we return to that gospel and the gospel be read again. And we ask again what Jesus is saying to us. And it's been transformative for me, not only personally, but also in my professional life. Without fail, the gospel, no matter whether it's the woman at the well, or if it's the crucifixion, or if it's the nativity scene, no matter what gospel is, it always has something to say without fail. Whatever issue it is that we have on the table, whether it's a political advocacy campaign, whether it's a statue, whatever it is, it speaks to powers and principalities, Stringfellowian. It speaks to Jesus' response to people in power. It speaks to Jesus, God's manifestation of his love and justice amidst oppression. So particularly when preaching about it and when speaking about it, I am very careful to bring my faith into it, to not center it in a political conversation around who is right and who is wrong. But what is the just? What is the Bible? What is Christ? What is justice, God's mercy calling us to do in this moment? And without fail, that has been that has been helpful. And there are times when I have gone into meetings and said, I read the gospel before I came in here and I don't know what it's saying,
Mm.
but I know that I need to bring it.
Right.
Or I've said, this is what the gospel is saying to me, and I don't actually know what it means. And without fail, someone else will say, wow, I never thought of it that way. What I hear the gospel saying through you is, and here we go.
Wow.
And it's been transformative. Absolutely.
I mean, I guess we talk a lot in church circles about entering the gospel not knowing, but there's also
Yes.
the power of like exiting the gospel without knowing.
Yes.
Like to go into community and be like, I don't know, what do you think? And then
Yeah.
something happens collaboratively and collectively that couldn't happen individually.
Well, the Bible doesn't say where you and I are gathered, I will be with you. It's where 2 or 3 are gathered. Like, bring in some other minds here because I'm speaking to all of you, not just you.
Right. So, sorry, I had a question and I've forgotten
Oh,
what it.
sorry. I
No,
may
no,
have
it's my ADD brain where things kind of skitter through and I got to
here
grab it.
for
I'm
that.
lost. So one of the most fascinating people locally I've met is Mr. Little George from the Ho-Chunk Nation, and he's a lay leader at the Ho-Chunk UCC Church, and I represent the UCC. It's one of my 5 denominations, who has refused ordination over and over because he wants to use his lay leadership position as a way of traveling UCC churches to talk about the doctrine of discovery. Right? And I think it's a powerful, I mean, as a lay minister, it's a very powerful model of lay leadership and lay ministry. But I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the doctrine of discovery
Mm,
and how we resist it or how we respond to it and how it's still
mm,
influencing us in ways that we're not even aware.
mm. Thank you. What a great question. The doctrine of discovery. Wow. So when I think about the doctrine of discovery, and all I can bring is my own experience to this, I think of it in 2 ways. There's there's what I think of as the legalistic definition. So the doctrine of discovery came out of some 14th century papal bulls, which were basically laws or edicts that the Pope set out. And one of them was this doctrine of discovery, which said, of course, in many, many more words and in very nice manuscript writing, I must add, it actually said, "Hey, explorers, go thee into the world." Not a direct quote, and conquer the nations and settle the nations. Let us know what resources are there. Let us know what we can settle. This Europe thing is getting really squishy. We have some internal conflicts. Where else can we go? What else is out there, basically, that we can take and own and colonize? And by the way, if there is any awkwardness around people who are already living there, our going understanding is that if they are not Christian, if they are pagan, it doesn't really count. So feel free to plant the flag there, because that makes it terra nullius, empty land. So if there are no Christians residing there, it is empty. It is to be taken, it is to be extracted from, it is to be used for our purposes. And so this was used worldwide to dehumanize and destroy and annihilate indigenous peoples worldwide. In every country that has colonization against all indigenous peoples worldwide, um, that is the legal understanding and definition, obviously paraphrased. I also think of it as that matrix that you're talking about, as that dream. So when you talk about that dream that you're in, that kind of, you're aware that you're dreaming, but you don't always know how to control the narrative, or can you? That's what I think of as doctrine of discovery thinking. When I talk about my internalized racism, um, I'll just tell a story if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for
Uh,
it.
I was um, I was meeting. Someone asked to meet me in Toronto, Canada, and they were the head of an organization that wanted to partner with us on a reconciliation initiative. And they asked if they could meet me in person. And we arranged a meeting in Toronto, and she said, I'll also have my assistant coming with me because she does the note taking. And I was like, great, this is phenomenal. So we met, and I saw 2 people walking towards me in the lobby. One was an Indigenous woman in jeans and a t shirt with a backpack, and the other was a white woman in a full business suit and a briefcase. And I went up to the fully kitted out woman with the briefcase, and I said, so and so, it's very nice to meet you. Oh, and thank you so much for taking notes today. And that was Doctrine of Discovery, because it was the Indigenous woman in the jeans and t-shirt with a backpack who was the executive director of that organization. So that's what I think of when I think of Doctrine of Discovery. It's not that I thought she was inhuman.
Right.
It's that I naturally assumed that she wouldn't have that high role. So when I think of undoing Doctrine of Discovery, it's everything from the assumptions that I make about people's place in society to the relationship that I have with land.
Right.
Do settlers own land? So
Right.
that's a huge question when it's unceded territory. So for me, Doctrine of Discovery thinking, that mirage, that fog, it's everywhere, and it's in every single tendril of society.
I mean, it's the unconscious biases, right? Like it's
Yep.
it's almost like the wallpaper of our world, right? It's all the invisible language, metaphors, systems that uphold this without us even being aware of it. Like it's just wallpaper
Not
for
even
the
a clue.
world. And you're talking about the Doctrine of Discovery and like, oh, if they're not Christians, go conquer them. And of course, then they got to Hawaii, right? And the Queen of Hawaii
Awkward.
is the organ player for her UCC church, or one of the predecessor bodies. And they're like, oh yeah, but also you, right? We can conquer you also because you're brown, right? Like suddenly that whole being a Christian thing got thrown out the window.
Right.
Because it wasn't really about a person's faith. It was about all this other
stuff.
And
what we are really learning from Indigenous folks and elders and storytelling, oral history here, is that in fact Indigenous spirituality is Christian. It just has different language attached to it. So even in this area, in the Episcopal Nation, there are flood stories. There are stories of the flood and the canoe that was lodged up on the mountain. I can see it from my front window. So it's not even that some Indigenous people were Christian and some people weren't. It was that the white people were unwilling to see that Christianity, that God was here already before they arrived.
I remember, I think Dr. Broken Leg used to talk about this, and I think there's a bishop from Atlanta, I'm not, if I get it correctly, who wrote a book about how Indigenous stories are their Old Testament.
Wow. Yep. That makes sense.
They're owning the spiritual depth. Like I remember going to a Lakota style Episcopal worship at VSP once, and we had water for communion, and there were Dr. Broken Leg had, instead of the Old Testament, we had Lakota stories, and how that kind of flipped the narrative for a lot of us. And again, all us good progressive Christians who suddenly were uncomfortable, right? Because we were not as progressive as we thought.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is always fun, especially at VST. But
I've also noticed another side of that progressiveness, though, that worries me just as much, and that's an unwillingness to recognize true Indigenous Christianity. So the idea that an Indigenous Christian can be just as closely aligned with a biblical story. Right. So what I notice in Canada is when Indigenous people present as evangelical, they're often labeled by Christians as colonized. So again, nothing is black and white. There are very evangelical and conservative and very liberal. And again, please forgive me for these labels. I don't actually find them helpful, but for the sake of this conversation. So there are Indigenous Christians on the same spectrum as white folks. Right. So sometimes folks will say to me, do you know any elders who could open our service with prayer? And so I will ask an elder that I know, and they will go and say the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
And then the person will come back to me and say, that was really great, but we actually wanted an Indigenous person to open with prayer. And I said, no, that's exactly what you got. That is the prayer of their heart. Right. And so that's another side of kind of the liberal, like it's not just drums in church. It is that. It can look like that, but it's not just that.
And what is that process like for people of Christian faith who are Indigenous, knowing that it's the faith that colonized you, but also owning it yourself and going through a process of ownership?
Hmm.
Like, what does that journey look like? And I mean, if you can even speak to that, I mean, that might be.
I would have to actually say that's not a question that I can answer. I have heard stories of what it's like, but I would say it's not mine to tell.
Okay. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I can only speak to what it's like to observe it. But yeah, I I I have heard that it can be painful.
mhm,
Yeah, just a feeling of not fitting in either,
right.
but wanting to be part of the family. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun here when we talk about these issues with people at church and whatever, and they say, well, but I've read Sherman Alexie, so I'm okay,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
As I mean,
mhm,
Sherman Alexie is very problematic right now as well.
Yep. Hey,
But
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but maybe that's not enough. Like, so what does the future look like for Christian churches or people in general to heal the relationship with indigenous peoples that goes
Yeah.
beyond uh, one Tribe Called Red CD and one Sherman Alexie novel? Like, what
Yep.
does that work look like for us?
The future is indigenous. I really truly believe, at least in Canada, the future of the church is indigenous. And that will mean different things in different places. That will mean different, it will look different in different places. What I mean when I say that is a return to gospel as center, a return to a relationship with all creation and the land, coming back to how we treat the land is actually how we treat each other, a call to value the wisdom of the elders and the youth, and be willing to sit in tension when those are different. A desire to have relationship instead of policies and procedures, and to base our governance on our spirituality. So Ginny Doctor and the Anglican Council of Indigenous People, they put out a document that is called "Our Spirituality is Our Governance," and it was an answer to kind of the white church's question of, well, you want to be self-determining in the Anglican Church, but what does that mean? Like, what's the reporting structure? What's the canons and constitution? What does that mean? And the response was, our spirituality is our governance structure. And so I truly believe that the future of a church that is reconciled or reconciling, because I think it's a forever process, is that we return to the values that actually Indigenous people were trying to live in before we came along.
Right. So I'm going to ask a question that I'm sure you've been asked many times, but it kind of goes back to the how you got into this work.
Sure.
You are the very blonde-haired, blue-eyed cousin of action star Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I can't believe you just said that. It's
I know.
amazing.
It's one of my favorite
Oh
things.
my God, look at my muscles. No, don't.
So within Indigenous Canada, are you treated with suspicion? Because who are you to tell the story, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. I am in some places. I am grateful that Indigenous teachers have been so patient with me and also smacked me around so well. And this is true. I really appreciate this. The aunties, they are not to be messed with. They will tell you when you are out of line, and it is amazing. And at the same time, they are so patient. And when they're done being patient, then they're not. And that's wicked. But what I'm trying to say is Indigenous people have taught me how to enter into Indigenous spaces. And I feel so badly for them and thank them so much that they took the time to do that. That does not mean that I'm welcomed everywhere. I understand that. I accept that. I don't deserve to be welcomed anywhere. I
right,
don't expect, like, think if I went in expecting and, uh, yeah, with that expectation, like somehow people deserve to be nice to me because I'm nice and work for the church. I think if I had that attitude, it would be very painful and it wouldn't actually work. But thanks be to God for the elders who have taught me how to enter into Indigenous spaces, show up and shut up,
right.
recognize my privilege, how to be present when I don't and when I screw up.
Right.
Because that is more important than getting it right in the first place, is how you come back when you screwed up. And anyone who's involved in this work will. And I
Yeah.
say this all the time. Give up your fear of getting it wrong, because you will. So don't even bother wasting energy on that. So there are places that I have a hard time in, and that I have to check my white fragility. Check my white fragility. And I've also been in it for 15 years.
Right.
And that's not to brag. That's to say no white person can go in and just expect the red carpet to be rolled out for them because they're excited about reconciliation.
Right.
We have been here for, well, I have been here. My family's only been here for one generation, but there are families that have been here and have been taking and have been oppressing, or been part of oppressive systems, and at the very least benefited,
Right.
benignly benefited from oppressive systems. To suddenly ask Indigenous folks to trust us with
Yeah.
their stories of pain is really unfair. So part of it is just putting in the time and committing to the discomfort.
And you mentioned right there about how benignly benefiting from the oppression, and I think that's a thing a lot of us don't recognize, that like,
Yeah.
like a lot of white folks want to say, "Oh, they made a choice back then. But
Hmm.
my ancestors made a choice. I
Hmm.
didn't make that." Like we want to separate ourselves
Yeah.
from the past without recognizing that we're standing on that. Like the infrastructure
Yeah.
of our life goes back to those generations. So how do we
Yes.
begin to uh, how do we begin to confess, right?
Yes.
That we built, that we stand on this infrastructure, and then once we confess, what is the new future we build, and how do we do it? Like, what
Yeah.
are the tools that are already present, and what tools do we need?
Amen. Amen. I think the conversation around white privilege is very important. And I think that a lot of people hear that phrase and unplug.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times I try to not make it comfortable, but tell things from my own experience that help people enter into the conversation in a new way. So a lot of times I hear, "Oh, sure, I have white privilege. I'm eating craft dinner and Mr. Noodles. That's some lot of privilege you got there." And I always say, "Look, my mother made clothes for me out of my stepfather's old clothes. I grew up poor. My family traded um, art for cow tongue so that we could eat. I didn't grow up with money, but privilege isn't just about money. And that's what I think it gets reduced to, is money.
Right.
Privilege is that I can walk down the street and see cops coming towards me and I'm not scared they're going to shoot me for no reason at all. Privilege is even if I don't get that job because I don't have enough education because I'm poor, at least I got an interview, or at least my resume wasn't automatically shredded. I can at least get a viewing for an apartment. My Indigenous sisters can't even get a viewing. So those are the kinds of things. And I think that we who are white, it's our role to really begin to have those conversations, both with ourselves and with our close knit communities, and then begin to spread that word, to help people understand that no one's attacking you as an individual person for somehow hammering people in the head with your privilege. Sometimes it's this benign, it's shaking the person of the hand who's wearing the business suit and not the person in jeans.
Right. Yeah, and I've noticed in the school system, like so where Aaron works in the school system, they have a cultural liaison
Mm,
officer, and so they have a cultural liaison officer for the Hmong community, which is a indigenous community from Asia that a lot of people are refugees here. We have a large population. We don't have the same for the Ho Chunk students,
yes.
right? And we do have a large
Yes.
Ho Chunk population,
Yep.
or large-ish.
Yes.
Um, Native American History Month, no one reaches out to the Seven Rivers Center, which is just downtown, and it's not a big city.
Yes.
Like, everything is 10 miles away, 10 minutes away, right? Like we're not
Yes.
partnering with the Ho Chunk to come into the schools during Native American History Month. And like I feel like that's a
Yeah.
white privilege also, because again, it makes the problems a thing of the past. Oh yeah, we have a bit of history. It happened a long time
Yes.
ago. We don't need to talk to the contemporary students for
Yes.
whom face this
Yes.
every day, or who need to understand what their own community is like, right?
Yes. And it's not until relationship. I mean, I didn't get this. I mean, I didn't didn't truly get my privilege until I was in relationship with Indigenous folks. I really didn't. I think I started to kind of intellectually undo the matrix,
Right.
but experientially, when I go to the store with one of my Indigenous relatives, I went to Canadian Tire, and every single time we go in and we say, we'll meet at the till, and the security person follows my Indigenous relative and not me. And that's just, and I ask them about that. And I think the most enraging part of that for me is that they say, oh, it doesn't, I don't even notice it anymore. They're not even upset
Wow.
anymore because it's just so normal that if they expended energy on every microaggression, what I see as an aggression,
Right.
but the person that I was with, they said that, oh, that's a microaggression.
Right.
The fact that they are asked 5 times in a merge if they're drinking, if they're a drinker, despite them repeatedly saying no. And then I ask them what that's like for them, and they say, "Oh, that's just normal." It's like, somebody saying, what is it like for you when no one stopped at the crosswalk when you were standing there? Well, that's just normal in Vancouver. Nobody stops at the crosswalk. It's that normal,
Right.
and that's the part. I'm sorry, that's the part that is unspeakable to me.
So,
Sorry.
no, it's all good. So how do you take care? I mean, this is heavy work that you do. Like, how do you take care of yourself?
My faith, I cannot imagine being in this work without God. I now know more. Um, I now know more than ever my need for God. The number of times I have said, "To whom shall we go?" Like, the powers and principalities are so strong. The colonization is so deep. The doctrine of discovery, terra nullius, that is so deep. That is not something that humans can overcome. That's my belief. That's my own faith. That those are not things that I can even touch. That is way above my spiritual pay grade. I pray more than I ever have. I go with my Indigenous relatives to the river, which to me is another form of prayer. We smudge. We do a lot of spiritual practice. That's the only way. It's the only way. I'm in therapy twice a week. No, in admitting that, because that's another very important thing. I can talk about self-care and, committing to showering and eating breakfast. But I think at the end of the day, I could still do all those things and just go under. It's really God that sustains me.
I mean, it's very interesting you're talking about your faith in God, and part of your story is almost a double conversion, right? Because you started in the archives not being a Christian, like you came to work for the church because that was the job you got, right? And then through that
I would
process,
say that I was a Christian, but I was not part of organized religion.
right? So like there was
Yeah,
almost there was a spiritual process
absolutely.
through that job, and also through that job
Absolutely.
confronting your own racism and converting or confessing and repenting of your own racism. So it's almost like a double conversion that you went through.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, when people talk about their Damascus Road moment, I think like there couldn't be a more clear story, because if I had continued on the path that I was on, I would indeed be killing Indigenous people, not with a gun or a knife, but the way that I live, the way that I speak would have been dangerous.
Right.
The way that I act would have been dangerous to Indigenous people. So when God says to Paul, when God says to Saul, "Why are you persecuting me?" That's what God has said to me as well, very clearly. "Why are you persecuting me?" And I was blind and I sat in that house on Straight Street. I always think it's very interesting that it actually says that Paul sat in that house for 3 days in Straight Street before Ananias got to him. And I remember those 3 days. They weren't 3 days for me, but it was much longer. But my own Ananias came to me and told me, "Okay, it's time for you to get up you have your eyes open now, so you don't get to sit here with spit on your eyes anymore. Go do your job.
That's fantastic. So
Yeah,
as we start wrapping up, I want to be mindful of time.
absolutely.
Because my entire life is squeezed between kid drop off and kid pickup. But as we're wrapping up, leave us with a vision of the future of the church.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what does it look like? What is when we reach utopia? Like, and Gutierrez, right, Theology of Liberation, talks about utopia as the future we never reach, but it calls the present to repentance. So what is this vision of the future that keeps calling us to repentance?
Yeah, I think there is a vision of something that we never reach, and there are glimpses of it here.
Right.
So one of the things that National Indigenous Archbishop Mark MacDonald always says is that in Jesus we get a peekaboo. We get a peekaboo of the new creation. We get a peekaboo of the age to come. We get a peekaboo of the New Jerusalem. And so I think that the future of our church is hopeful. The future of our church is beautiful, because what we have is an opportunity to create more peekaboo moments for ourselves and for the rest of the world. So I think that, again, if we are able to learn from Christ as Christ existed here in the land before we as white people got here, if we can learn from the teachings that were already here, that God put here before we ever got here, around the gospel, around land, around relationship, around humility and respect, if we can do that, we're going to do more than just peekaboos. It might not be the full vision, but we can do more than just pull the curtain a little bit. We can have a full 3-act play. And that's my hope for the future, is that together, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, centering the voices that are most connected to this place and this time, I really, really believe that the future is one of opportunity, and not opportunity in a capitalistic or acquiring way, but opportunity to actually see 3-act plays of the kingdom on this earth.
Oh, that's beautiful. Amen. I want to say amen to that. So Melanie, we're wrapping up. I want you to know that the Durr family loves you. Hope you know that we miss you. Hope you know that we miss you a lot, as well. You know, all of Canada, but one of you always believed in me when I didn't, especially when I first got out of VST and just could not find work. So I'm it means a lot to me that I can use part of my work to connect with you, because you were so very supportive back in the day. And I just miss hanging out in the archives with you. Like, I remember that was a good summer.
So do I. I miss hanging out in the archives too.
Do you like maintain like a secret archiving hobby just to, you know?
Oh, it's not even secret. I volunteer at the local archives. Yeah, no, you can't reform us. It's just not possible.
And for all the people who are going to watch this after we're done, Melanie is also an incredible artist. She does amazing work. You don't sell your work, right? Like this is, I can't point people to.
I have an Etsy shop. I sometimes sell a thing or two, but nothing official. I mostly gift things. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, amazing artist. Thank you so much. I will.
Thank you.
I will put titles on this, and I'll try and get it posted either tonight or tomorrow, depending on how crazy the young people are.
Well, from this household, from the Grizzly clan of the Unkakatma Nation, from this household where my dog peed on the couch just beforehand, and I think this is a great time to take him out again. I'd like to say Hamilth and Wallachstein and Ikstikdwaywen, and in English, greetings to you all. See you later. We don't say goodbye. See you later. We love you all. We respect you all, and have a wonderful morning or afternoon.
Thank you very much. I will
take care, my friend.
And I will let you know when the video is up.
Yay! Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.